Good morning, everybody in the US, North America, Canada, and good afternoon to everyone in Europe. We're very happy to have the C-suite of Canify AG for this Zoom call. Canify AG is one of the fastest growing medical cannabis companies in Germany. We have four speakers. We have the CEO of Canify, Sascha Mielcarek. We have the CFO, Sebastian Pötzsch. We have Silvia von Pistor. She's a Chief Innovation Officer. And we have Arne Wilkens, Chief Commercial Officer for Canify. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Pablo.
So look, we have to cover, but let's start with an introduction, Sascha, about Canify. If you can tell us about the company, your business strategy, and what makes you different from other companies in the space. Thanks.
Thank you, Pablo. So, Canify was founded, or the original companies which then joint ventured into Canify were founded in 2018. So in German terms or European terms, this is actually a quite old company. Today, it has evolved quite a bit, as you already said. So Canify consists of three basic business units. The one, which is also the major differentiator, is our GMP certified production site in the south of Germany, where we do import and produce for our own brand, but also for CMO and external clients. Brings us to the second unit, which is our own brand. So we sell actively into Germany, UK, and Switzerland through our own sales force and our own key account approach under our brand, but we would also white label for third parties. And last but not least, we also have an own teleclinic arm. It's always a misleading term. So it's not a brick and mortar clinic. It's a remote setting where we bring patients in front of cannabis experienced doctors and help them to get access to cannabis as a medicine. What makes us unique? We are by definition, and you are actually looking at faces with very deep experience in the pharmaceutical industry. So the whole C-suite of Canify is seasoned in regulated markets. So we are by definition a pharma company. We are focusing on medical and medical cannabis only. By the news heard today of the German government, we feel once again that we have taken the right decision.
That's great. Thank you, Sascha, for that. So look, let's focus now. We want to touch on different parts of the business, but let's start with the supply chain. Talk about, what is your strategy in terms of supply chain? Do you own cultivation? Do you own production? Could that change in the future? How many suppliers do you work with? Let's start with that, Sascha or Arne. Thank you.
Yeah. So our supply chain has been expanded in the last couple of months. Well, first of all, Canify does for sure dried flower product, which is the market right now exploding, especially in Germany. But we do also full spectrum extracts, purified extracts. We have the only sublingual spray in the German market. And some of the listeners might have heard our press release that we actually have built a joint venture to even develop some innovation into the German and European market. So we have a very, very broad portfolio and then also a very broad supplier network. We especially built out in the last months our dried flower supplier network. We are importing from a total of 10 countries by now, from South Africa, Latin America, Canada, Portugal, Macedonia, and also from Denmark. That's one of the broader networks, which helps us also to serve the current dynamic in the German market and make sure that we have product for all moments and for all type of indications and patients.
Just on that point, talk about you have this EU GMP facility in Germany.
Yes.
Why is that an advantage for you? And how many of these type of facilities are there in Germany at present?
This is actually a question I nearly would have to hand over to Silvia. So we are one of a few. Honestly, I think it's four focusing on cannabis. So a GMP certified facility, first of all, is not easy to have. So you have to build it, you have to certify it, you have to have it audited by an authority. That takes you an average 2.5 years and around 10 million of investment. So once you have it, you have a bit of a time advantage against somebody who wants to do the same thing. And in terms of importation and handling of product, it gives you a very, very high flexibility. And you're simply matching the pathway to German markets. So the only way is to have a GMP certified product. So by having a GMP certified manufacturing site is actually the precondition to be able to sell into Germany. But Silvia, you might want to add.
No, I think you perfectly summarized that. There is, of course, there's the option to be a wholesaler, but if you want to build your own business and have your own brand entering the market and all the market spaces, then having a manufacturing license, which is mandatory to come with a GMP certificate in Germany, is the way to go. And to keep it up and running, you need your teams to make sure that you get revisited at least every 3 years by the authority, confirm that you still meet the standards. And that's definitely the rarer part of the business in Germany, that this is part of the company's license to operate, yes.
So at present, you don't own cultivation. Would you plan to apply for a domestic production license, Sascha?
Definitely not. We might at some point consider vertical integration, but I wouldn't so much look at Germany as a hub. Let's say cannabis is a very climate-dependent, energy-intense, labor-intense manufacturing product, and I'm not sure that Germany is the best spot to grow cannabis.
So when you say vertical
at the moment, and maybe to add to that, Pablo, sorry for that, but let's say to actually answer the very, let's say, differentiated demand of the current European markets, we are very happy not to depend on own cultivation these days. So we can actually select, audit, and make sure that we have a portfolio of suppliers satisfying all needs in the market. Right now, I wouldn't want to depend on my own cultivation.
Okay. And before we move on, just staying on supply chain. So you talked about 10 countries. I don't know if you can disclose how many suppliers precisely right now, how many you have 6 months ago, how many would you have by end of the year? And when I hear of companies having so many suppliers, is that a problem or an advantage in the sense that you have a lot of turnover on suppliers, or on the other hand, you want to have that variety? But I suppose the consumer also wants consistency. Just talk about how you reconcile all of that, please.
Well, it's actually one of the bigger achievements of the team you're looking at in the last 2 years. So when we joined Canify was depending on 2 suppliers. We immediately expanded the network of suppliers to 8 suppliers. And then when the new law or the reform mid of last year hit Germany, the market skyrocketed. And not only us, but the whole market suffered a bit under replenishment difficulties. Which we kind of took as an opportunity to broaden the network even further, to make sure that we are always having access to right volumes, right quality at the right price. It's not an easy undertaking because we are GMP certified facility. So we are not just picking a supplier and ship. We would visit him, audit him, qualify him, sign TQAs, apply at our authorities. So it's something which you don't do overnight. We stop here at around 20-25 suppliers because you're right. At some number and at some number of parallel importing, it gets very complex in your supply chain. So we're not planning to have hundreds of them. We are planning to be very close and selective on the suppliers we pick. And again, we believe that a number between 20 and 25 is the right number to manage also your inventory risk.
And I know the focus is mostly on flower, but you talked about extracts. I mean, in terms of what you can disclose, how many suppliers you have for extracts? Where are you importing extracts from?
Extracts is a bit different for us because we are importing them as a final good. It's not a finished good because Germany remains a compounding market. We have right now 3 suppliers of extract products. We are considering to potentially expand, but very honestly, full spectrum extracts are a commodity in the German market, so there's no good reason to have several of them. What we are looking for is more innovative form factors. And that's something we would rather invest than in further extract launches.
That's great. Thank you. So look, we move on now to questions around go-to-market strategy, the commercial side of things. Just for those of you listening in, if you want to ask questions, please email them to me or put them on the chat room or put them on the Twitter bubble box. But we don't take live questions through the Zoom, right? But please feel free to put them on the chat room or send them to me. Arne, talking about, just for the audience that maybe not so familiar, please explain what does it mean when they say it's a compound market?
Well, compound market basically means it's differentiated from a classical pharmaceutical product, which would be a finished product. Compounding means that the pharmacist has to do the final production step of the product. And I think, Silvia, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's rather a regulated question. Because of that, what we by law supply to them is starting material for the product they kind of put together. And the question then is how much they do as a production step, so to say. But by law, it's basically the pharmacist also taking then the responsibility for the product, because he is the one manufacturing it and handing it then out to the patient. For flowers, what pharmacists do basically is testing them. So they have to test them if there's THC and CBD in it. They have to repack it, they have to label it, make sure that everything is aligned, and then hand it out to the patient. For extracts, it depends a bit on the extract. Some they have to really compound in a way, and they're classical traditional manufacturing steps. For others, it's rather like with the flowers, where they do have again to test, also to refill, and then to label it with the patient information and make sure that the patient takes them the way he should take them.
Thank you. And just in terms of the go-to-market strategy, Sascha or Arne or Silvia, in terms of brands, do you sell mostly under your own brand? Do you do white label? I understand you also provide CMO services. Just touch about, what's the focus there, or do you prefer to have the three approaches?
So yeah, right now the majority is sold under our own label, and you may imagine that the margins are the most promising ones. But we have more and more started to supply also to white label clients, so it's nothing we would exclude. And we are also open to serve as a platform of entrance into the European market. So a typical CMO service would be something we would also be open to debate. Right now, 80% of our sales are under own brand, and 20% of our revenues are stemming from CMO and or white label efforts.
Right.
Yeah, just to add on that one, what we also offer, because we have very good access to the flower and to the key customer in the market, which would be the specialized pharmacies. We also offer us as a distributor and marketeer for other companies, leveraging our access to the pharmacies. Because building that is quite troublesome, because you need to know the players. We have all that in place, so we also do that as a service to others.
Okay, so on that point, that was the next question in terms of distribution, right? Because sometimes, and this is again for the audience, when we look at some of the sales numbers for the German companies, some of the ones that are public, right? Sometimes we may be double counting because some of them act as distributors for other people's brands, right? So in your case, you sell your own brand, you distribute mostly on your own, or you may have a company that helps you with logistics. But there's other companies out there like Canturage, Cansativa that also provide distribution services. Do you rely on them, or pretty much you take care of your own distribution and, like you said, offer it also for others as a distribution arm? If you can expand on that.
Yeah, sure. So actually, we are fully focused on direct access to pharmacies for a couple of reasons. One is it makes good sense to be as close to your customer as possible, to understand his wishes, what he wants, also get feedback on your products through them. Number two is simply, of course, if you bring something in like Cansativa or Canturage in between, of course, they would like to see a margin, which you don't have to pay if you do it yourself directly. Plus, you can offer that as a service also to third parties. Just on Cansativa and Canturage, to expand a bit on the business models of those three companies, including us. So Cansativa originally started as a wholesaler. So their vision was to become the one point stop shop where the pharmacy, which would be interested in medical cannabis, could source every product which is available in the market. And at a rather late stage, they offered an own brand and own products exclusively, so to say. Canturage, they are rather a hub into the German market for suppliers from outside of Europe, basically. And they don't have an own brand. They sell under the brand of that grower who's distributed through them. We built an own brand from the beginning, and we basically sell only our brand or related brands where we do offer services to. But the approach is not like, for example, Cansativa to offer products of others. We have pretty much focused on ourselves.
Understood. And then maybe, Sascha, if you can expand on something that has really impressed me is that, in relative terms, I could say you are newer than other companies in the market, right? But here you are selling under your own brand for the most part, building your own distribution. Is that a problem, or how have you been able to accomplish this? Because it seems in a short period of time you haven't had to rely on third-party distributors. You've been able to build it on your own.
Well, I think one explanation is that the people you're looking at are not new to that market. So it might be that Canify was one of the last intruders into the top 10, but the people managing the company are not. So it's not the first time that we do it. And we are quite proud that we were able to do something in a rather short time where others needed more time. And we are still catching up, right? So I think it's not a disadvantage, but let's say we are a rather young company when it comes to our recent commercial and supply successes, and we keep building on.
Yeah, no, of course, congratulations for that. And if you can expand, Arne or Silvia, in terms of describe your sales effort, in terms of how you differentiate your approach into a cash market versus a reimbursed market, whether you're attacking, targeting the consumer, the patient, or targeting the doctors.
Yeah, so it's basically, it's not so much cash or reimbursed, it's rather who actually takes the decision on the prescription, which could either be the physician, which is the classical pharmaceutical setting. This is in general terms the case for extracts, which are often reimbursed. And to address physicians, you need a classical pharmaceutical sales force, which we have established recently. Without access to physician in an extract market, for example, you will fail because there's no way that someone prescribes it if you don't educate and train physicians on your products. For the flower market, basically, the key gatekeeper is the pharmacist because he decides what he's offered to the patient, and the patient often takes the decision himself, and the physician is rather prescribing what the patient wants. It's not allowed in Germany to have direct promotion to patients. So we focus on the pharmacies quite a bit. And that's the way how we do it is with a key account management system. So we have key accountants for the large pharmacies. In Germany, you have 17,000 pharmacies, but only 300 of them have a focus on medical cannabis. It's a growing number, but it's still a relatively small number. You need key accountants for them. For extracts in particular, you need access to physicians, which is something that not many companies have, but we invested into that.
Thank you. And just on the same topic, Sascha, you talked about your your teleclinic. How important is that to your sales?
Sascha, you're on mute.
Thank you, Arne. That's one of the areas we are most aggressively scaling as we speak. So since the law reforms of last year, with cannabis not longer being a narcotic, it's now you are able to have a telemedical approach to prescription. So many patients are looking for access through a teleclinical approach. So that's something which is actually booming since the law has changed. Right now, it's not a high percentage share on our revenues, but it will be in the next year. Plus, we are talking to several partners to also scale that business through partnerships, which is a bit the DNA of Canify. So stay tuned that for our clinics business, there will be some news very soon.
Interesting.
And then from a more content perspective, let's say we are one of the few companies who are integrated through the whole value chain. So we import product, we process product in our facility, we sell it and distribute it, and we have access to, let's say, physicians and patients who are actually actively seeking for the product. So we are actually going along the value chain as one of very few companies.
Understood. That's very helpful. So look, I mean, just moving on now, Sascha, to the market outlook and your sales performance. I think there were some news today on the political front from the new government, positive news, if you can discuss that, but also your market outlook. We had about 32 tons imported in the fourth quarter. We try to estimate that about 60% of those are pharmacy purchases. Imports continue to grow. Just talk about the market outlook and how do you size up the market right now? I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I think the numbers you're mentioning are relatively close to reality. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, that many patients are self-paying for their medicine. I think that's rather a sign that cannabis is a very, very worthwhile medicine, but brings you to the fact that there's no market research institute right now being able to really give you hard figures on how big the German market is. But the quarterly import of 33 tons in Q4 of last year gives you a certain indication. And our own guesstimation is that we have reached a number of 10 to 11 tons a month by now. And I think we will not end up shy of 100 tons of dried flour in Germany in 25. Plus, then don't forget about the extract market and other innovative factors which are on top of those 100 tons. So I think that's a number I do personally believe in to be reached in 25. And since today we know that also the new government is not attacking, especially the medical market, we were honestly also not suspecting that. So the medical market stays as it is. They even will not touch the cannabis law by now. So what the coalition has posted today is that they will evaluate the situation late this year and then decide on that evaluation. So that basically means nothing will happen in the next months. And also the new government is actually known to be supportive to the medical market. The medical market is the one we are playing in. So we feel very much tailwind as we speak.
Right. And just staying on that point, in terms of the reimbursed market, I know that the import data comes out, every quarter. We have data for the fourth quarter. The reimbursed data lags more, right? I mean, the latest numbers I think are end of June. But in your opinion, what's happening with the reimbursed market? Is it also growing or not? It's all mostly on the cash payer side.
I can
it's also
take that.
Growing. Yeah.
Yep.
You go, Arne.
Okay. Yeah. So it's so basically the extract market is predominantly reimbursed, and that one is growing not as fast as the flower market, but it's a very stable growth, roughly 10% quarter over quarter, which is because it's a pharmaceutical market. If you compare to other pharmaceutical classical markets, it's a tremendously high growth rate. On the flower end, the reimbursed number is rather stable. It's slightly growing, but it's pretty stable because in general terms, health insurers don't like flowers too much because of the overlap with the rec market in a way. That one is growing at the flower end. It's a self-pay market, which is exploding. And the extract market is also growing, but not as strong. But still, for pharmaceutical market, it's remarkable.
Right. But just to stay on that point, and maybe just to go a bit deeper there. So the theory is that with CAN-G, more doctors are willing to prescribe, right? So even on the reimbursed market, the assumption would be that there's more doctors willing to go through the effort of filling up the form and arranging reimbursement for the patient. So that's obviously positive, and that should drive some growth over time. Is that true?
It does, yeah. It is true. The thing is that a physician would not start without someone triggering that process. And for that, you need, again, sales reps who are kind of accommodating them and also educating them, because for a physician, this is something completely unusual and something completely new. He's not familiar with that. So in order to see a steeper growth, you would need more sales rep, basically, which, since they are pretty expensive, that's a bit the difficulty here. But you're absolutely right. So, and not to forget that it has become easier to prescribe medical cannabis extracts, medical cannabis in general, for physicians. That also helps driving the market.
Right. Thank you. So, Sebastian, you are the CFO. Let's talk about the sales performance of Canify. Obviously, the market is growing. You have all these tailwinds. I believe that you are outgrowing the market. If you can talk about your performance in 2024, how that compared with 23 and your outlook for 2025. And also touch on whether stockouts were an issue in 2024, which I think they were for.
As also stated in your report, in 2023, we had a relaunch of the company. So we just started selling from July onwards. We made about 1.1 million euros revenues in 2023, and then had a tremendous growth with about 6.5x to more than 7 million euros in 2024. And looking forward, our conservative planning for this year, so 2025, is 21 million at least. And we're planning with 38 million bottom line revenues for 2026.
Right. And just staying on 2024, you talked about a number of 7 million there. Were stockouts a problem? Could sales have been higher if you hadn't had stockouts in parts of a year?
Yeah, that especially in Q4, our biggest problem was actually the stockouts. So we had about a total of 9 weeks where we had significant stockouts, and out of that we had about 4 weeks with complete empty shelves. So we probably could have done maybe 10 million or something in revenue without the stockouts. So the stockouts were actually the biggest problem. But as explained by the team and your report, we are actually we are working on that issue as we speak. So the fact that we have far more suppliers now actually gives us more security and flexibility in that case.
Right. So, okay. So not to repeat what you're saying. So in 2025, you don't expect stockouts to be a problem?
No, actually not, because I mean, that's the reason why we increased the number of suppliers dramatically.
Right. Yeah. And go on.
Yeah. Pablo, that also feeds back to what you asked initially, right? The number of suppliers you need. We all know that cannabis is a market that depends on a flower, right? So it's a plant that is grown and it does not always perform as planned. So you need to be flexible to make sure that patients get what they need. And that's something that we were luckily able to build now, so that we have various suppliers in various countries with different lead times also, right? For us to import and to process and to release to the market. And that's, I think, one of the biggest reliefs that we have to our portfolio now, that we're able to maneuver a bit more agile throughout the portfolio.
Understood. And Sascha, in terms of company growth, are you looking at entering other markets, or for now the focus is mostly just on Germany?
Well, we actually have signed agreements for UK and Switzerland. We are not necessarily planning to move there ourselves, but to supply product into those markets pretty soon. We are also eyeing at Poland, which is a bit of a more challenging entry, as you have to submit a full medical dossier into that market, and it takes you longer to get access. And Australia remains an interesting country, even though it's structured very different from the European landscape. So we are looking at it and eventually planning to do some moves in the next 12 months. So a bit the way we look at the market is that with GMP certified product on hand, what are the markets we can actually access? And we would move into those markets. But in all honesty, right now, our priority number 1, 2, and 3 is Germany, by the simple dynamic it has taken.
Got it. Thank you. Sebastian, going back to you in terms of just more on the financial picture of the company, how are you funding the company right now? And if you can talk about who owns Canify at present.
Well, so first of all, the company has been cash flow positive since the second half year of 2024. So we are not actively funding the company for survival. However, we are selling stocks to private and semi-professional investors in order to facilitate our growth plans. And currently, Canify is owned 48% by a family office in London, 23% by a venture capital firm in Munich, about 12% is us, the management, and the rest, roughly 17%, is free float to all kinds of private investors.
Thank you. And then in terms of...
If I may add to that, Pablo, sorry. So those are original investors, right? So we were never exposed to a capital round at certain multipliers and market evaluations. So the two funds Sebastian was mentioning are the original investors of the two companies who actually went into Canify. So we have the quite unique situation that we are basically valued at cost, right? So we were never exposed to a multiplier expectation like some of our contenders.
Right, understood. And then in terms of, Sebastian, in terms of the funding rounds, I understand that right now you are going through a capital raise exercise right now, and then you're looking to do an IPO sometime next year, if you can expand on that.
Yeah, so basically we are using two different ways of funding. So we are currently applying for a WIB, which is basically the permission to sell stock to public investors with BaFin for a tranche of 6 million euros. Additionally, we are looking for up to 15 million euros from institutional investors, and we will start our fund raising within the next couple of weeks.
Got it. All right. And then more in general, how would you describe current market conditions to access debt or equity capital? And the reason I ask that question, sometimes we in the cannabis world are very, maybe US or North America centric, and other markets are impacted by what's happening in North America from a regulatory standpoint. But on the other hand, as we're seeing in Germany, you're having significant growth, right? So while debt capital access may be an issue in the US, maybe it's not as bad in Europe. But how would you describe that for the cannabis industry in Germany right now in terms of the conditions to access debt or equity capital?
Well, let's talk about that first. So what we are actively doing, we are using factoring companies for our increased cash flow management. However, getting debt is rather difficult because there's not that many investors accepting cannabis as collateral, just because they would need a license in order to be legally owning it. So we are working with some high net worth individuals regarding debt and trade financing. However, we are mainly equity financed. And equity financing works quite well for us as we have the ability to sell our stocks. However, what we are seeing regarding professional investors is that they have been basically waiting for the new government to be set up and for some legal clarity to come up within the market. But they're actually contacting us quite frequently over the last 2 to 3 months. So the interest from especially international investors is significantly growing.
Right, that's great, and especially after today's news, should be even better, right? So now, Sascha, in terms of strategic investors. Is it too early to be looking at them? Is there interest from them at the moment? And when I say strategics, I mean, companies, either cannabis companies in the US or elsewhere, Canada, that could be interested in investing in German medical companies like yourselves, or even pharmaceutical companies that could be interested. What can you say in general on that topic? Or is it too early to even talk about that?
No, I think it's not too early, and Sebastian already have mentioned it, right? So we do feel a very incremental interest in the last months. I do believe that some of the Canadian companies are looking at the very, very dynamic growth in Europe and looking to ways of entering and participating and to invest into a company like Canify, who can be an entry platform. I think is a smart thing to consider. Like everybody knows that we cannot import product from the US. So from the US, it would be more professional investment vehicles who would eventually look at Europe. I think they have been rather shy in the last months. But I think looking at the numbers we are producing, I would be surprised if they are not looking at international. So the answer is, let's say, we feel that a strategic investment is actually something very, very smart. We would be welcoming it. We would be entertaining it. And again, we are feeling that there is companies looking at Germany/Europe.
Look, before we move on, Sascha, I want to stay on that point. It's like maybe as you talk to these potential investors out there, I guess the question that people would have is that you have these Canadian large licensed producers that have been in the market for quite a while, or there's other distributors, like you mentioned before, that have been there for quite a while. But obviously, you have proven that you can be a top 10 or higher player in the market, and you're outgrowing other players. But in that context, again, when you're talking to these investors, just maybe rehash the idea of how you have been able to break through so well in a context where you would have thought some entrenched players of a large scale?
Well, I think it's a bit of a different position and a different strategy, right? So I think the large players for a long time were looking to sell mainly their own production and inventory, while we had the freedom to select and manage our supply network according to demand and let's say our selection criteria, which made us ending up with a broader portfolio at a time where that was demanded and allowed us to surpass some of the larger corporations. If you look at them, you will see them now also amplifying their portfolios because, let's say, you cannot depend in a very diversified market from one cultivation site or two, right? So I think it's a better answer to the market need to have a broad portfolio. And this broad portfolio plus our market knowledge plus our relationships into the German European market allowed us to hypergrow. And you are right, I think it's now rather German operators who have been very successful since April of last year. I don't want to be disrespectful. Everybody has been successful in the German market, but if you compare the multipliers, you see a bit who actually won the race of the last 12 months.
Yeah, thank you. So look, we want to move more into now discussions on products and the structure of the market, maybe a bit of more of a weeds conversation. Arne, let's talk more color on your products. I mean, flower in the cash payer market, is this all about low prices right now? Is it all potency? Is there demand for premium flower? Just give more color in terms of what's doing in the market, or is it so sophisticated that there are many brackets and segments in flower?
Yeah, you have a couple of segments, and we try obviously to have products in all these segments. There is a huge demand because it's a safer market. Not surprisingly, price is of importance, but you also have a segment for crafty, high quality flower where patients are willing, even if it's a safer market, to pay higher prices. We also try to establish let's say, classical pharmaceutical portfolio with, for example, balanced flowers for those cases where physicians takes the decision by themselves. So it's, in a nutshell, you have different segments, and it's the best if you can address all of these. But the majority in terms of volume is of course, obviously the rather low quality, low price segment. And potency is kind of perceived as a quality item. So you basically get higher prices for higher potency products still, although it's from a medical point of view not very sensible, but it's a fact in the market right now.
Okay. And in terms of extracts, I don't know if this is for you, Arne or Silvia. In terms of extracts, I think you recently entered this segment. Just remind us when you enter. I think that there's been some brands that were well entrenched there. How are you doing there in extracts so far?
Yeah, extracts, it's a different story because it's a rather long-term game because you have to convince physicians, and they will also not switch patients to your product. You basically compete for new patients. Clear market leader still is Tilray. I guess that's known. However, we know how to build or be successful in such a market because we were with Tilray, many of us. So actually, to be successful, you need two things. One is good relationship to the physicians, to the prescribers, and the second is ideally you have differentiated products, and we have both. And because of that, I think we take off quite well, although it will take time to enter sales levels which are really, really outstanding. But it's moving quite quickly, and we are very happy with how we perform there.
You mentioned Tilray being number one in extracts. Do we know who's number two, or are there a few players that can claim to be number two right now?
No, there's now a clear number two in the meantime, which is a classical pharmaceutical company called Stada. They have now roughly 20% of the market. Tilray is still with 45%. But they chase them in a way.
Now, if you can, Arne, disclose what's your sales mix right now between cash payer and reimbursed market, roughly? Is it 90% cash payer, reimbursed 10%?
Yeah, so yes, pretty much so. Because I mean, the majority of sales we do is in the flower market, and the flower market is 95% self-pay market, so it's cash predominantly.
Silvia, I mean, Canify has talked about this novel product strategy and partnerships with Albion and Tetra Farm. If you can expand on that, please.
Yeah, of course. I think the current market access is clearly medical, right? And what we're currently doing is that we reinvest into differentiated products and to develop those on our own. So we both have the expertise, but also the right partners on board. As you mentioned, we are working with Tetra Farm since end of last year. So that's a sublingual formulation that is available to patients. And that has been a game changer for many. And the other one is that we started a joint venture with Albion and will develop the first inhaler for patients. So you might know that there are many inhalers out there currently, but none of them is certified as a medical device. And that's something that we strive for because we feel it's a patient need, and also something, as Arne addressed, that physicians are convinced with a certified device to prescribe that to patients, and that they're convinced that they receive the right dose at the right point in time. And that's something that we feel we need to build on even more also in the future, to make sure that this type of innovation and meeting patients' needs is exactly what the medical market actually lacks in cannabis currently.
But to be clear, this product that you're developing with Albion, when do you expect it to be in the market generating, commercial sales, or does it still have to go through clinical trials and approval?
So there is the registration as a medical device that we need to generate data for. We have kicked that already off, but we currently expect to have towards end of 2026, early 27 to be available for patients and physicians in the German market. Yes.
Got it. And Arne, in terms of your route to market, in terms of your sales force visiting what I call the reimbursed channel, would you use that in the future to sell non-cannabis products? And I guess I'm asking the question is that there may be an X numbers of total doctors in Germany. I'm not so sure what % of them sell cannabis, right? Maybe you can confirm the percentage. Your aspiration to sell non-cannabis products with your sales team, how do you balance the fact that maybe you don't cover all the doctors in Germany? If you can talk about that strategy longer term.
Yeah, so I think right now we do focus on medical cannabis, but you're absolutely right. It does make sense, since you have access to the physicians, to bring other products to the physician, pharmaceutical products and classical pharmaceutical products, which makes sense for them and which fits with the medical cannabis products that we already offer. So this is something that we're considering. In the long run, in terms of physicians, there are no clear data on how many physicians actually prescribe cannabis, but what is clear is it's still a very small number in Germany. So there is very much room for growth in the classical medical end, because right now still many physicians are not reached by the companies, the medical cannabis companies. If you compare to opioids, which started 20 years ago, also they took quite a time until they were broadly used in a way. So it will take time, but in the long run, I think, it will become a commodity in Germany also with physicians. But as said, not tomorrow.
Understood. Look, now just moving on to questions on the market structure. Sascha, I'll start with you. Just share with the audience here a little bit about the clinics. How easy and costly is it for consumers to get a prescription? Are there more dedicated, 100% dedicated medical cannabis clinics? If you can talk about that, please, in terms of market structure.
Yeah, well, that's a type of companies which have actually been numerous since the reform back in April 24, because now it is possible to have a telemedical diagnosis and discussion on a prescription. Prices vary. It also depends a bit what type of clinic structure is behind that consultation. Let's say in our world, as the Canify clinic, we do have real doctors sitting in their practices and actually doing telemedical consultations with patients. That's very valuable physician time, which doesn't come for free, right? So, but it strongly depends on your medical needs, on the number of discussions, on the situation. Is it a first prescription? Is it a follow-up prescription? And basically, what is your medical need and your indication? So it's not easy to answer. It oscillates between 25 and 100 euros, right? So it depends strongly on what you actually desire as a patient.
Understood. And Arne, a question regarding pharmacies. I think you mentioned before there are 17,000 in total, about 300 of them sell cannabis. Does the 90-10 rule apply here, that maybe 30 of those 300 account for 90% of the market? Any color you can give in terms of, the pharmacies?
Yeah, so since the pharmacy landscape, that has changed quite a bit since April last year, since the change in law and the explosion of the market. So there are quite a few new pharmacies coming online, and it's more evenly balanced. So you have many different pharmacies who now sell quite huge volumes of product. In the old days, it was rather one or two or three pharmacies who really made vast majority of the market. That number has increased now, and every day or every week, new pharmacies pop up who focus on medical cannabis, and that will keep going, I guess, because since the market is growing, obviously also pharmacists intend to participate from that market growth.
Got it. And Sascha, a question in terms of imports versus domestic production. Before, under the prior rules, right, there were three companies, Aurora, Tilray, Demecan, that had a quota to build locally, I think 2.6 tons in total. Not sure they were making use of a full quota. Now they have applied to increase their quota, right? They can produce more. How do you expect domestic production to increase, either from the three incumbents and future licensees, or will imports still dominate the market?
I do believe that imports will still dominate the market, so I wouldn't be aware of any other company applying for local cultivation license. So you're still talking about these three facilities. To my knowledge, only one of these facilities has announced to expand the capacity. So you're still talking about a relatively small share of the market. And well, at the end, it's an open market, so quality and price will decide on the market share, not so much where it's cultivated. So, but again, the capacity is not more than 5% of the total volume as we speak.
Got it. And just moving on to a different subject, and of course we are respectful of all the companies out there, but if you want to, hear, Sascha, try to benchmark yourself against some of the other players in the market, whether it's, the Curaleaf 420 Pharma, Demecan, Cansativa, Cantourage, Sanity, or some of the Canadians like Canopy Growth, Aurora, Tilray, just, whatever you can share.
Yeah. Well, I think one differentiating factor, especially against the large Canadian companies, is that our geographical focus is clearly Europe, that we are a pharmaceutical company only, so we entertain medical markets, we entertain regulated markets. That's our DNA, and also the expertise of the team at Canify. There is alike contenders in the German market, but not many. I think from our integration, we are one of the deepest integrated companies, as we dispose, as I said a couple of times, of a GMP certified facility, which is able to import and to release GMP certified product. We sell ourselves, we distribute, so we have the commercial structures to entertain the market. Plus, we run a clinic, so we also have access, even though, let's be very careful, we are a very compliant company, so we don't have access to patients, but we do have access to patient experience. So by that breadth of service, we might be one of the, let's say, most integrated company along the value chain.
Thank you. Look, last set of questions. I know we've touched on it in terms of market outlook and how the new government would change things. Just one question specifically, in terms of the new changes. If we think about decriminalization, in your opinion, how has it worked in Germany so far?
Well, on the medical side, it has worked in terms of many patients who did satisfy their needs in the black market before have now found access to the formal medical market. So I'd say that has been a success, because I think we don't have to argue that the medical GMP certified market right now has highest quality standards. So we should be lucky for each patient who satisfies his medical needs in the formal market, right? So I'd say the medical cannabis law has been a success. I'm not so sure about the other side, the cannabis law as such. I'm not in that business, so that's maybe more of a personal opinion, but I think the social clubs had a hard time to establish themselves. I think regulations are still kind of unclear. Now their future might be even under jeopardy, because nobody knows how the new government will finally act on that side of the law. So I think that's still a bit difficult. So we as Canify are very glad that we are not invested into the so-called Pillar 2, because that's the one I would not necessarily be betting on.
Right.
In terms of lawmakers and government decisions, right?
And not to make you repeat what you already said about the news today from the new government, just to be clear, some people, the way they are interpreting is that they didn't say anything specifically, so that's a good sign, nothing changes. Or should we be interpreting in a different way and thinking, well, maybe they will have a separate announcement later in the year?
Well, I think it's not a secret, and I actually had the pleasure 2 weeks ago to be on stage with the drug policy speaker of the Christian Democrats, Simone Borchardt. So even the Conservative Party, which is now most likely being the ruling party and delegating the chancellor, is very supportive to medical, right? So there's no intent even by the Christian Democrats to draw back the medical law. What they do challenge is the social clubs and the semi-legalization we have seen in April of last year. So what these news today mean, they will not decide immediately on anything. It remains untouched, but yes, they posted that they will look at it at the end of the year, which is basically other words for, let's say, the powers delegated to the new Minister of Health. He will look at the laws and at the situation and get the freedom to start deciding on eventual reforms by end of the year. But it's not the coalition, and it's not a, let's say, high hierarchy topic. They have bigger problems to solve. So they kind of, let's say, delayed it and delegated it back to the Ministry of Health. That would be my interpretation.
I mean, I should know this, but is the Minister of Health is still the same, or has there been a change?
We don't know yet. There has been some leakage today. So rumors have it that it will be a Christian Democrat Minister of Health, but we don't know. It might still surprise us. I think it has not been published yet who will take what ministry. It seems that it's the Christian Democrats taking over Ministry of Health, but that's just a rumor. So let's read the press in the next couple of days, and we will know in the next, I'd say, 5 to 6 days at least.
Right. Thank you. Look, I know we're running out of time. I'm just going to read some questions I received online, email. I'll paraphrase some of them, but one, and Sascha, you decide who answers. One person is asking, like, given the growth slowdown and challenges in the U.S. market, are you surprised that we're not seeing more U.S. MSOs investing in German companies, like we saw Curaleaf invest, for example, in 420 Pharma? If you want, I mean, only what you can answer, Sascha, but these are questions I get.
Yeah, let's say last time I talked to some of them when I've been at MG Biz in Las Vegas, which is a year ago, the focus seemed to be very much on their home market, as they have own problems to solve and an own dynamic to fix. Plus, the size of any state in the US a year ago has been far bigger than Germany in total. I think that's slightly changing. So I would expect also American MSOs and or investors to start looking at Europe. Has it happened yet? Well, we know the classical investment funds which have put capital into cannabis. They're well known, but I would not be surprised if more vehicles are looking into the European growth.
Right. Now, another question in terms of the Canadian smaller producers, right? Some of them are called craft growers or just smaller licensees. Do they have an opportunity in the German market, or are some of them just too small to enter to sell in Germany?
Well, they definitely have an opportunity. You're right. Some of them might be too small and might not have, let's say, the administration to be able to entertain an international dialogue and supply. Plus, the sheer volumes would not allow, let's say, they wouldn't repeat too often. What we actually do is that we approach them through hubs and through counterparts who, with our help and alongside our qualification processes, can then work with craft growers, and we work with medium-sized companies then to bring product of these craft growers through a hub into the European market. That's a business model we have expanded on the last 6 to 12 months. I'm actually in Canada as we speak, and one of the ideas of being here is to exactly speak with those type of suppliers.
Right. And also a related question, and I appreciate you answering here all the questions that are coming up. Given the fact that Arne said that a lot of the market is in the value segment, Does that mean that most of the growth in the future in terms of imports is going to come from Colombia, South Africa, and less so from Canada, or there will still be room? And can Canada compete in a market that people are looking more for value? Any thoughts on that? You're on mute, Sascha.
Could you repeat the question, Pablo? You were breaking up.
It's on the supply chain side of things. Arne said before that value was a very big part of the market right now. People looking for lower costs, right? So does that mean that most of the growth in imports in the future in Germany will be coming from countries like, in Africa or Latin America, as opposed to Canada? Unrelated question: can the Canadians compete in a market that's going to be looking more for value? Any thoughts on that? And I know this.
I think they can perfectly compete, and they are competing, and we ourselves are importing into the value segment from Canada. The sheer economies of scale of the larger producers would allow for that. If you look at the gross, the trade prices in Canada, they are still below, let's say, German's value prices. So I think it's actually something very interesting for Canadian-based companies. In the very long run, we might see a trend towards low-cost countries as labor and energy is simply more cost convenient than in northern countries. But I think we are 5 years away from that. So we are more and more looking at Latin America and Africa, especially South Africa, but they cannot supply all the demand in the German market. Plus, also quality standards have to be developed and kept. So Canada has some time advantages because, let's say, the market is open for so long that there's many experienced growers in Canada. So I think that's an advantage they might want to use.
Right. And then just maybe this question is coming from a producer there, but someone is asking me, what about the premium segment? There are some premium brands in Canada that are also trying to enter Germany. Does that make sense? Is there an opportunity for them?
It does make sense. Well, I'm not the genius, firstly, comparing cannabis to wine, right? So it's a bit the story of the premium segment in terms of volume is much smaller than the value segment. It has higher margins and higher prices, but it's also strongly competed because we see now a lot of supply of very good product into Germany, and the cake is not that big. So yes, you can, and yes, you can compete. But do not over expect on volumes which can be sold in a given price into that premium segment.
Right. Thank you very much to Sascha and to all the speakers. Maybe just make some closing remarks here. I would say, particularly in terms of the fundraising you're doing, if you want to, a message for investors here. But again, thank you for your time, and just any closing remarks and why people should be investing in your company right now. Thanks.
Well, I hope we laid out some of the reasons why we might be an interesting vehicle to invest. And just it's the now or never moment we feel for especially Germany, if not whole Europe. So we are in hyper growth phase. We do feel rightfully positioned, and we do feel rightfully evaluated in terms of the company evaluation. So we are, I think, a very, very interesting opportunity as we speak. We are looking actively, so feel warmly invited to reach out to Sebastian or myself. And again, the train is running, it's running pretty fast, so it's now to jump on it.
And to anyone listening, if you don't have the contact details for Sascha or Sebastian, just reach out to me. I can send you their emails and phone numbers. But again, thank you very much, Sascha, Sebastian, Silvia, Arne, for your time today, and congratulations on all the progress that Canify is making and will continue to make for sure. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Pablo. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Have a nice day.